Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Plastic-Free Delaware's Delaware Food System and Waste panel today on Cinco de Mayo. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to get ahead and just get started here as some more people start logging in. I will be your host today. My name is Brigid Gregory. I've been volunteering with Plastic-Free Delaware, and I'm going to use the initials PFD, for over a year now. And I've recently been hired as their new community composting director, which I'll get to in a second. But before we get too started, I want to review some housekeeping things. So the panel will be recorded today. So if you need to leave or something, that's totally fine. It'll be sent out to everyone later. Before we jump in to the panel, I'm going to give a brief background on today's topic. And then I ask that when we do some pre-prepared questions, I have a couple questions prepared for each of our panelists, that if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat at that time, or at the end of the prepared questions section, I will open it up and allow people to ask questions as well. If you're having any technical difficulties, please feel free to put something in the chat, and Dee Durham has very willingly volunteered to monitor that room and assist with anything that happens in there. So again, welcome. So happy to have you. We're going to start by saying Happy International Compost Awareness Week. For anyone who doesn't know, this first week of May is International Compost Awareness Week. It is put on by the Composting Council, which is a big group nationally and then also internationally that focuses on education and awareness and implementing compost initially. And before we get into the panel, one of the big things we want to announce today is the launch of the Delaware Community Composting Initiative. So this is PFD's newest program. I'm going to refer to it as DCCI because it's a lot to say, but we're really thrilled to start this program. This event is kind of our inaugural event. Basically, Plastic-Free Delaware has noticed the need for reducing organic wastes going to the landfill. If you read some of DSWA's reports, which I know we'll get into a little bit later in the panel, about 25% or more of what is being sent to the Delaware landfill right now is organic waste that could be diverted. And so we've been working on creating this community composting program to help communities start composting and educate people on food waste diversion. So our aim is to offer educational programs to communities, facilitate collaboration, and provide technical assistance to implement both campus, so at schools, and community composting sites to reduce overall food waste and divert food scraps and wasted food from the landfill and putting it back into usable soil. So real quick, I'm gonna do a brief introduction to our program. So what we offer our partners, if you want to partner with us, if you've got a community site that wants to partner with us to set up a composting site, we offer the leadership. So I am providing site-specific leadership and assistance throughout the first year of your setting up your composting site. I'll be helping you plan, build your site, including submitting the DNREC permit, communicating with your volunteers, helping you troubleshoot any issues. The other thing is we'll be providing training for your volunteers at your site, who's bringing food scraps to your site, those kinds of things. We've received funding to assist with establishing community composting sites throughout the state. Most recently, we were awarded the Newcastle County Conservation District mini grant. So thank you to them. But so we have some funds available to help us establish these sites that would be used for things like tools, resources, bins, those kinds of things, just stuff to get you started. We'll also provide you with signage and marketing materials and things, again, to communicate with your community what's going on at the site. And then finally, you'll be joining a community of composters throughout the state. We are sponsoring or hosting the Delaware Composting Cooperative, and we'll provide an opportunity for quarterly updates and opportunities for collaborative members to share best practices and things like that. So we're really hoping, and we will adapt, obviously, if we need to offer different things as we go through this first year. But what we're looking for in partners, so you have an idea of what we're looking for. We need one site coordinator to manage volunteers, people who are going to bring food scraps, and then weekly management of the composting site. Like I said, I will be working very closely with that person, but we need one person to kind of commit to doing that. The site coordinator would need to take a composting training program. We're working right now with UD's Cooperative Extension to make a composting training that would include online content sessions, but then also some in-person tours to get your opportunity to get your hands dirty and just see things in person. And then your volunteers would take a training again, but that would be hosted by me and be site specific. You also need a physical site. So the scope of each community project will be different. Some communities might be ready for a larger project. Some are just one bin. So we will be specific to your site and work with you. But you do need some sort of land that's preferably not too close to a building, walkways, bushes, that kind of thing. And then also a routine schedule to create and establish some consistency for bringing food scraps, yard waste, that kind of thing, and managing your composting site. So just to kind of give you a quick background into like what that would look like, if you're interested, I have some information at the end of this for how to contact us. Everybody's biggest question is, what are we composting? What are we not composting? So we are going to, technically any organic matter can be composted, but at a small scale level, like we'll be doing with community composting, we want to avoid items like dairy, meat and bones, oils, cooked foods, pet waste, because they take a while to decompose, they attract pests and rodents, which we definitely don't want. And they also carry pathogens and things. So that only can really be properly managed at an industrial scale facility. So we will only be accepting in our projects sites, produce scraps, crushed eggshells, coffee grounds, and filters, leaves, grass clippings, those kinds of things. Just to give you a good quick question, because I know a lot of people are always concerned about what can and cannot be accepted. And real quick, if you are interested, we are offering and working with schools throughout the state to set up some opportunities for food waste education, food waste diversion education and prevention, as well as setting up some composting sites. So we offer a plethora of programming, which you can all check out at our website as well, but I won't get into too much today. And finally, if you would like to learn more, please scan that QR code, sign up for our listserv so you can stay up to date on what's going on with this new initiative, the Delaware Community Composting Initiative, especially if you like today's event. We're going to be having other events like this, even if you're like, I'm not part of an organization or know anybody who can do this. Feel free to stay in tune with what's going on. We'll have other online and in-person events throughout the year, as well as just tips and tricks if you do backyard composting too. So with that, I'm gonna pass it over to, or switch gears and start talking about the panel today. So Delaware Food Waste, or Delaware Food System and Waste panel. As I said before, I'm gonna just talk briefly about the topic to give people some background information. So, what is the food system? It's the process by which food is grown, produced, processed, distributed, marketed, consumed, discarded. It's very complicated, and there's systems at the international, the national, the state, and then the local levels. And for today, we will be focusing specifically on Delaware's food system And I will acknowledge now that it's a very broad topic. So even more so, we're going to be specifically focusing on small scale farming, urban farming, access to foods in the state, that kind of part, as well as the food waste aspect. And so, but if you're curious about the Delaware food system at a large scale, this is just some facts for you about what that looks like. So we have over 2,500 farms statewide, which is almost 40% of the land. Chickens, no surprise to a lot of people, are the number one livestock. Number one crop grown is corn. Agriculture generates over $8 billion for the state. Now this is probably old because it's from 2016, so I'm sure it's grown, and supports over 30,000 jobs. And this one, I think at the bottom is really important, is 61% of Delawareans live in census tracts with no grocery stores, and 27% only live in tracts with only access to one grocery store. So that first one, 61% live in census tracts with no grocery stores, means that if they're in an urban environment, they live in less than a half a mile. There's no grocery stores within a half a mile of their environment. And if they're living in a rural environment, 10 miles. So that's a big issue. And I think that's something that we might be talking a little bit about today as well. Another insight here is we talk about marketing and accessibility of food in the state. So statewide, we have about 11 CSAs. I pulled this off of the Delaware Grown page, so I'm sure there are probably more that they just don't have on there. 77 supermarkets. That included things like Walmart, but it didn't include Target, which I thought was kind of interesting. And then farmers markets and farm stands throughout the state. Switching gears a little bit to talk about waste. So nationally, 30 to 40% of all food produced from the start to consumption is wasted. But this includes things at the retail level, at the home level, at distribution. But that's a huge percentage. And that is one of the things that we are going to talk about today, and how we can help reduce that. And finally, if you're not familiar, this is the EPA's food recovery hierarchy. It's a great tool to utilize when trying to consider alternatives to landfilling and incineration for organics waste. And it helps us decide, how to prioritize those alternatives. So source reduction at the source, feeding hungry people, then animals, industrial uses, and composting, and then landfill incineration. So I want to get into our panelists now and get started here. I'm going to give some very brief introductions to everyone, and then we will get into it with the questions. So let me just pull up my bios real quick. All right. So today, and I'm going to butcher your last name, I'm sorry, Gail. We have Gail Hermenau. I hope I'm saying. She's from University of Delaware's Cooperative Extension. She is like a master of all things: gardener, composter, food educator, wellness volunteer. She's been a volunteer educator for University of Delaware's Cooperative Extension since 2004, and a member of the Workshop and Speakers Bureau. She presents workshops on composting, healthy soil seed starting, and a variety of vegetable gardening topics. She's also a member of the Community and Schools Gardens Committee. She also works part-time for the University of Delaware's Cooperative Extension as a lawn and garden program assistant, and is a past chair and current member of the Delaware Farm and Food Coalition, and a member of the Cooperative's Extension Family and Consumer Science Council, and a member of the State of Delaware's Farm and Food Policy Council, serving on Education Outreach Committee. So she is well-versed in all things farm and food related. And we're very happy to have her with us. Next, I have Michael Parkowski. He is from the Delaware Solid Waste and Authority. He's the Chief of Business and Governmental Services, and has been there for, well, over 18 years. And I know I don't have a complete bio for Mike, but I know he is on several different councils. He's on the Recycling Public Advisory Council, and is quite heavily involved in recycling education and waste education and outreach, and communicating those things with the communities. Next, I have Rabiul Rafi. He is from University of Delaware's Food Recovery Network. He's a third-year student at University of Delaware. He serves as the president of the Food Recovery Network at UD, a chapter of the national nonprofit that works to reduce food waste and help feed people. Since its inception in 2015, the UD chapter has managed to recover several thousand pounds of food, all of which went to local communities. And yeah, so that's great. Thank you, Rabiul. Next, I have Chad Robinson from the Food Bank of Delaware. He's the Director of External Affairs at the Food Bank. He received a BA in Political Science from Wesley College and a Master of Public Administration from Wilmington University. He was the legislative liaison for Lieutenant Governor Matthew Dent of Delaware, and in this role, he was responsible for developing the legislative agenda for the lieutenant governor and overseeing interactions with the General Assembly. Previously, he worked in areas of higher education as well as in the U.S. Senate, and in his role at the Food Bank, he oversees the community and partner relations as well as advocacy and public policy of the organization. Next, I have Greg Williams from DNREC. He's the environmental science with the Department of Natural Resources and Environmental Control, DNREC, sorry. He works in the Division of Waste and Hazardous Substances, which ensures compliance with waste management laws. The division encourages waste reduction and recycling for residents, businesses, and local governments. Next, I have Matthew Williams, who is the servant leader and founder of Conscious Connections, Inc., known for consistently demonstrating vision and effective follow-through in diverse challenges. He believes in education plus exposure equals economic opportunity for all. Conscious Connections, Inc. is an urban farm and social entrepreneurship venture in Wilmington. Next, I have Ruth Arias from Bright Spot Ventures, which she founded. It's an agriculture-focused training program in the West End Neighborhood House in Wilmington, I believe in Wilmington. Bright Spot Farm was founded in 2011 with the goal of providing paid employment training pathways for young adults, and began employing youth transitioning out of foster care systems. Today, they continue to provide meaningful hands-on work experiences and trainings to low-income high school students from Wilmington and Newcastle County. And they operate a 3-acre working farm and nursery garden center through which it trains youth and sells bedding plants, vegetables, herbs, and fresh chemical-free vegetables to its Wilmington and Newcastle County community. And finally, I have Nora Melley, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing Melley, sorry. She's the education manager for the Delaware Center of Horticulture. She heads up all of the education programming, develops curriculum for students age 1 to 99. And previously, she ran a horticulture program at Philadelphia at Abraham Lincoln High School and led her students to receive a bronze medal for their exhibit at the 2020 Philadelphia Flower Show. Awesome. And her career began on a 6-acre organic vegetable farm. So I want to again welcome all of our panelists. I know that was a lot, but basically we have some awesome, well-versed panelists joining us today. And so I've talked way too much. Let's get into it. Yes, I'm going to now stop sharing my screen for a minute. Thank you. All right. Whew. Okay, so now we're going to get to the Q&A portion. Thank you for bearing with me through all of that. My first question today, because I want to start with foods first, and then we'll get into waste, and then we'll kind of do like a little wrap-up question at the end for everybody, is for Gail and Nora. So, and I will let you guys, whoever wants to jump in first, please feel free to. But how is small-scale agriculture, i.e. home, school, community gardens, farms, important to the Delaware food system as a whole? And can you discuss, benefits that they provide to these communities, as well as maybe challenges that they face versus large scale farming?
Sure, Gail, do you want to start?
Go right ahead, Nora.
I think, Brigid, what you posted earlier about the lack of grocery stores in a lot of these neighborhoods is a really big issue. And I don't think any of the small community gardens or the small farms within Wilmington or within some of these more urban areas is going to provide all of the food that everyone needs to eat, but it's a really good supplement. And we're doing a lot of work trying to get more people, to grow some of their own foods, even if it's just a few herbs to sort of supplement what they can get in other places, especially with the pandemic and food scarcity and security. People are worried, and being able to grow some of their own food gives them some confidence that they can provide for themselves and their families.
Yes, I'd have to agree with that as well, and say that there's been an increased need over the years for school and community gardens. Community gardens have grown tremendously over the last couple of years, just from the requests that come into the University of Delaware's Cooperative Extension. They've grown to about over 100 really throughout the state. And a lot of them began in the area of Wilmington. That is an area where there's limited access to fresh vegetables and fruits. So in response to that, a lot of communities got together, and a lot of people acted as leaders in establishing community gardens in their neighborhoods, and reached out to us to help them, make that happen, and there's a lot of things that need to go into that. There needs to be funding. And so in response to that, the Delaware Department of Agriculture has put together a lot of grants and enabled a lot of these communities to take advantage of some funding to be able to support either in-ground or raised bed production of some fruits and vegetables that they otherwise wouldn't have access to. And so talking about closing a loop on a neighborhood and food waste, that's really a really good representation of how that happens, because they produce the food there, and all of the different participants use the food in their homes. Some of them have community gardens attached to other gardens, like the Robinson Garden, which was formerly known as 12th and Brandywine, which Nora could probably speak on a little bit more. There's two things happening there, where they used to sell some of that produce and raise funds to also, return back into the programming. There's often a lot of programming that takes place and education along with these gardens, and not just in how to produce the food, but nutrition education as well, to try and get people to eat some of the things that they're producing, some of the things that they might not have been used to eating during their lifetime, and in ways that they can improve their health. And so attached to all of these are many services and resources for the community, as well as teaching them and educating them on how to manage the materials on their site. And the best way to do that, of course, is through composting. And that's a way that they can return all of those materials back into their garden, as long as their healthy materials are not infected with disease or pests or anything like that, that they can also continue to make that sustainable. And so I think those are the things that are easily to manage. I think it's a challenge when you look to larger scale composting sites. Most of them that have been established in the state, from my understanding, now maybe some of the panelists know a little better than I, but they've always been established as a as a commercial site because they want to sell a product afterwards. And so that's a little different, managing something like that as a business and a commercial composting site as farmers returning materials back into the field that they're going to plant in again. And from some of the farmers that I know, they do a really good job of taking care of their soil. They have a PhD in agronomy. They're highly educated, intelligent scientists that really work really hard on their soil and every aspect of growing food for the state of Delaware. And so following all the different regulations that they have, some of the people that have grown, let's say, what they would call specialty crops, they just leave that in the field and then they return that into the field as it decomposes. There's other commodity crops that are managed a little differently. Then there's farmers that also have livestock. And so that type of source that they have would have to be managed in a different way. No matter what the farmers are growing, there's always an audit that takes place, and there's really strict regulations that they must follow to keep everything safe and healthy. And so it's really a challenge for them to change that type of system on that large of a scale. But when you're talking about community composting, I think that is something that, if people are patient and we're willing to work and willing to change some of their practices, that, has the potential to be pretty successful. When you talk about the different percentages of waste that ends up in the landfill, a lot of that comes from homeowners. So they would have to be educated and change their practices. Also, there's restaurant food waste and things like that, where they have a tremendous amount and there's just no one sometimes that will take it from them. They have this product and they don't know what to do with it. And so it ends up in the waste stream because, there isn't any other option. But I think all of them are really receptive to changing some of that and doing some things that, would be a little more beneficial to the environment, as long as it meets their needs as well, because they're a business. All of these things happen, with businesses. They need to have people to be able to do that work. I think it opens up an opportunity for entrepreneurs to get involved in some type of business of moving materials. But then that would be DNREC and Delaware Solid Waste that would have to monitor that type of thing. I'm sure they have rules and regulations when you start transporting those types of things. But I know that I took part in a conference from the University of Delaware and the University of Maryland, and we worked together with farmers to try and build resilience on the farm. And one of the things that was a big topic during that conference was food waste. There's often a lot of food waste because consumers won't purchase food unless it looks a certain way. So a lot of parts of edible food is, removed. There's health and food safety laws against gleaning fields and selling a product or using a product in, a restaurant or a culinary school. So those types of things, make it a challenge. But I think it's a really nice opportunity for Delaware to sort of, maybe put together a pilot program and see how this goes.
No, excellent. No, I agree, and I'm glad that you are supportive of it. And kind of to go back to something that you were just kind of talking about a little bit there, as far as what opportunities that you see available. And to go back, maybe Nora, you can share your thoughts. What are the ways that we, being citizens or communities or in different fields, can support small scale agriculture in our local communities, both at the site, the farmers, or at a legislative level?
And so we here at Delaware Center for Horticulture get a lot of grants to fund some of this. So, being cognizant of what's out there for us to get money to fund programming. And I mean, money is important for anything any of us do, as much as sometimes we don't want to think about it. And starting young with children, because I think a lot of the issues we're seeing, like Gail mentioned, people not wanting to use fruits or vegetables that are not sort of perfect. If there's some education when people are younger about how to grow your own food, about how to cook your own food, and sort of get out of that mindset and get people able and willing to use things that aren't perfect, get them gardening even a little bit on their own. That's a really good thing on a sort of community or organizational level. For individuals, I think trying to garden yourself, if you've never done it, there's lots of support out there from lots of different places that will help you. And joining a community garden or starting one if there isn't one available near you, it's a lot of work. And if it's not a clean site, there's a lot of physical labor involved, but it can be really beneficial for the entire community.
Gail, do you have anything you want to add to that?
To support those projects, if you're talking about a legislative level, you could, not everybody is on a first name basis with other legislators, but you could find out who they are and you can write them a letter and you can say, wow, are you aware of this wonderful project that's happening? I really support this. How do you feel about it? We would love to have more of these in the community. Just to let them know, like they're always looking to their constituents to tell them what is it that you care about, and how can we help to make that happen. So I would say don't be afraid to reach out to them, send them an email, write them a letter, but then be patient, don't be demanding, be very polite, and build a relationship. The more relationships you build with people, the more likely these things are able to happen over time. And then I really think that education is a big part of it, because a lot of people assume a lot of things about our commercial farmers, our traditional farmers, our organic farmers, our small scale farmers. It's really difficult for a small scale farmer to get started. So there, maybe there needs to be a little more support in that area as far as, available land, water access, things like that, might be beneficial to get more small farms started, and then support them, purchase their product, go to the farmers markets. There are a lot more farmers markets than that were listed on that,
I'm sure there were
on that list, and, get out there and support all your farmers. That's what keeps them growing. Larger scale farms, they already have a contract in place about, their production, but some of the small scale farmers, they produce a product and hope that they're going to be able to sell it in a variety of ways through a farm stand, a farmer's market, CSA program. So that's one really good way, and don't worry about having all of your food look perfect. Sometimes you have to, I think, just really think about the food that you're eating, because everybody's used to having like that perfect fruit or vegetable in a plastic container. They even wrap cucumbers in plastic, and that those kinds of things people are used to, and they want that. And when it's transported far and wide, they need to have some of that in place to keep it fresher longer. But the more that you can use your local food producers, the better, I think. And then that comes with education.
Yeah, no, for sure. And so I'm going to switch gears a little bit now. And these next questions are going to be for Ruth and Matthew, to kind of tag off of what Gail was just talking about towards the end there about, supporting your local farmers. So for Ruth and Matthew, as urban farmers, social entrepreneurs, what kinds of barriers and challenges have you guys faced in trying to, enter this industry? And, please share a little bit more about what your respective organizations are doing to give us a little bit more background to understand, because I know they're not just one thing. And, just share how we can assist you, and what ways, urban farms and work pathways that you guys are initiating can be supported.
Matthew, you want me to go first?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Okay, so I'm Ruth Arias. I'm the program director for Bright Spot Farm. I didn't find the program. That's okay, Brigid. We've been around since 2011. We started off as an organization that employed youth aging out of foster care, but we were at a community garden, growing out of 16 raised beds, and we grew the program. Now we're leasing land from the state. We lease 5 acres of land. We're using 3 acres of that, and we also have a greenhouse. The reason I became interested in urban ag is because I come from a background of living in the city. I'm from New York. I lived in the Bronx most of my life. And living in those types of environments, you do see, as Brigid said, you don't get the same, even if you do have supermarkets that are right across the street, you don't get the same type of produce and vegetables, fruits that you see in upscale neighborhoods. So I always had a passion for educating my community and trying to make that access easier for my community as well. So right now, one of our challenges has been, because of COVID, we did have to pivot how we were growing and using our produce. There weren't any farmers markets. There was like a whole shift we had to take. Fortunately, we were able to make it shift towards the benefit of our community. So we shifted 80% of the produce that we do sell for CSAs. Our CSAs are, only 30% of that is for members. The other 70% are for food insecure families. So we've been trying to get contracts. We have a contract with the state. We have a contract with Highmark. So what they do is they pay us so that we can feed the community. So out of the 70% of those low-income CSAs, we go out into the community, either to community center or churches, and we distribute free CSAs. So that's how we were able to face that barrier. The other one was getting our youth, being that they were out of school and they needed like a community where they, somewhere that was consistent where they can go to. We were able to retain our youth all through COVID. They came, we didn't have any dropouts or anything, which was cool because they just needed somewhere to go because they weren't going to school. So this was like a place of respite for them during all of COVID.
Are you finished, Ruth?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't want to interrupt.
That's fine.
Hello. I'm Matthew Williams, founder of Conscious Connections, Inc. I've been in this community since about 2010. We are located in the north side of Wilmington. CCI has been official since 2013. We are urban farm, but originally we started out, my mantra is education plus exposure equals economic opportunity. I'm a special education teacher by trade. I've taught in major metropolitan areas, Philadelphia, Camden, Newark, as well as Wilmington. So I really wanted to start an urban farm just to expose kids to ag. I'm also, I played football my whole life, so, and I do coach my children. So I'm a big advocate of you are what you eat. I like to eat, and as I get older, your body starts to change. So I really wanted to expose kids to some of the right things. Greens. The more green you eat, the healthier you are. Hence, that was our start. Delaware State actually played a huge role because they took me on a minority farm tour about 10 years ago. We visited some minority farms in Virginia, in the Maryland area. And that was really instrumental in me coming back to Wilmington, learning about the Brownfield program. I was going to church around the corner from where we're located. It's a lot of vacant properties, vacant lots around here. I talked to some people from DNREC, Jane Kirby, Greg Crystal, and they really liked the idea. And hence we have our farm, and that's Site A. Since then, we've grown. We have about 11 plots of land within a 2-block footprint, and three to four is actually currently operational. We have 20 raised beds on one of our properties. We do grow from the ground up on site A because that was fully remediated. We have a greenhouse, a 20-foot greenhouse. We have a 40-foot trailer that we use as our office / classroom / laboratory. We do a lot of community-based events here. We have a youth component, that youth program called Leaders in Training, the Lit Crew, where again, that's really about exposure for the kids, for the youth. And it's actually, I'm working with our youth to develop or create a pipeline between them, for them to get to college, in particular Delaware State University and UD. Some of the barriers I'm finding with youth in this particular zone is they don't have the academic foundational skills to actually get there. So I had to pivot and more or less, we're doing some workforce development. So we're getting into the whole hydroponics sector heavy now because it's such a sprawl with marijuana and cannabis really being legalized everywhere. You have all these grow facilities and they pay really good. So I'm finding with the youth that we service, instead of harping on the academics, everyone, all my life I had to modify instruction in the classroom. So I'm learning you have to do that in real life, especially. So we're just trying to teach them how to work, use hydroponics and actually grow outdoors. We are in an environment in the area that's really, really stressed economically. It's pretty volatile, but by the grace, we have combated that here on the zone through our urban farm. There has not been any shootings on this block in the past 2 years. I always mention that because that's a big deal. If any of you know where I'm located, I mean, it's serious around here. And we've had some legislatures come here. And one time, one of the news people told me, he said, man, we don't even come down that block. But if you come down our block, you can act, it's extremely quiet and very peaceful as a result of the work that we've done here. So that's really a testament to what urban farming does in the community. Now, I won't lie and say I'm not having challenges getting everybody to actually come out and participate, because that is a challenge. I mean, we talk about food insecurity. We talk about the lack of grocery stores in urban environments. But, it's really, we talk about the lack of education. But what I'm finding is a lot of the residents aren't really interested, nor have a desire to want to eat more produce or to want to learn more about eating what we might consider as healthy. They don't have a desire to do that. So we're just trying to figure out ways to meet them where they are. And that's where my coaching background comes in, and not really kind of just coming here real perspective. Oh, this is what you need, this is what you need. No, because that's not really working where we are. The big deal around here is violence. We've shown them that on this block, there's no shootings. So they believe that, they see that, so now we're trying to get them to just come out and participate. We planted 40 fruit trees on one of our properties. We're building a split rail fence around it. That's one of our symbols in this area. We have split rail fences, which you won't see in the hood, and you see it on our block. And we're creating an urban farmer training site. So once these things really get up and running, we're going to get more people to come out and participate. We do a lot of community outreach activities. We feed people a lot, and we're present. And that's really important. They see us out here, they see me out here, and they truly do respect
that. Very, very powerful stuff from both of you, and very interesting. And the main thing is, sounds like education, and meeting people where they're at, because I think that's really important, and something that you both kind of stressed, is, how can you assist children and educating them from such a young age? Because I think that you're right, as they get older, hopefully these values that you're instilling in them now will grow with them, and you're providing them a space to learn and grow and develop and explore and all of that. And hopefully that will be taken with them, but also back to their communities. And I hear you, Matthew, about, you know, how to talk to residents that might not be interested in doing that. And I would love at another time to chat more about that, because that is, I think, a very interesting and challenging topic. But one more question for you both before we pivot to waste. What advice, you talked a lot about like the challenges you guys have had recently and over time. So two things: what can we do? What can us as people here or your community, surrounding communities, do to help you, whether that's financially or volunteering, whatever. And what advice would you give to a potential urban farmer, somebody who is like interested in potentially entering the field? How about Ruth first?
All right, I'll go first. I had to change location because my battery was dying on my computer. So now I'm in the greenhouse. It's a little loud. One advice I would give to potential individuals that can actually fund an organization like Matthews. I always take Matthews as like an example of how to make with not that much, but it's hard to do without as much when you don't have like I'm under the umbrella of West End Neighborhood House, so I have more access to certain things. But if you could support other urban farmers as Matt, and not just in a volunteer capacity, it's always about funding. Like it's always about the money, right, Matt? Like we're always chasing the money. And the only way he has to employ people, and the only way for him to employ people is to actually have the funds to employ. Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest challenges as an urban farmer. Not just the access to the land, but be able to like continue to fund your program.
I sincerely have to echo what Ruth said. Resources, we are very resource strapped. So I'm always dealing with capacity challenges. Just give you an example. I was fortunate enough to have some dynamite farm managers that came on board. They were all part-time University of Delaware graduates, but they were just really straight up with me. They said, we love what you're doing, but I want to start a family. I want to get married. I want to have some children, and I just can't compete. I can't offer benefits. I want benefits. So, I lost one, and then I just, one is out there working now, and she said that she has to put her 2 weeks in. And I respect that. I mean, they're young. They want to get on with their lives. I can't compete. So I'm always going after different grants. But again, I'm just a resourceful in my own way. So I'm pivoting a little bit to get into more specialized production, meaning that we're growing specialty items to sell to select markets, where that is a way that we're going to generate some revenue, because it's a lot of Delaware is an ag state, so it's a lot of produce that's grown here. Urban farming has been a trend and is here to stay. It's a lot of different urban farmers, so I have to be a lot more strategic in ways to generate money for our organization. And it's not even for me. I pretty much volunteer my own time. It's for everybody that comes on the team, because we get a lot of young people through our lit crew, and then people that's coming through the different universities. I would like to be able to retain them.
Excellent. Thank you for both sharing. We're going to pivot now to waste to talk a little bit there. So the next questions are for Mike and Greg. So you are respectively from DSWA and DNREC. Can you guys provide some background on food waste issues in the state, as including, is it growing, reducing, those kinds of things? And then what are some alternatives you guys are pursuing to just straight up landfill?
Okay, yeah, I'll go first. So from a food waste perspective, all waste right now is growing. So, I think people want to think about waste. It's hard to understand, but waste really is a byproduct of economic times. So when the economy is doing well, there's more waste in general. Food waste generally makes up 25 to 30% of the total waste. Well, organics, I mean, food waste is a subset of organics, but we've done a good job in limiting by doing landfill bans on yard waste and that type of material. So we don't have that material in the landfill now, but we still get a tremendous amount of food waste. And so, as looking at things from the waste end, I mean, from DSWA's perspective, the thing that we've looked at the most is, we do believe firmly in the EPA's hierarchy. So these programs that people are talking about are fantastic, like, food rescue, getting food to people, and I don't think a lot of people realize that most of the grocery stores, at least in Newcastle County, have a collection program where their waste is going to animal feed at farms. So not everything's going to landfill, which is good, but unfortunately, we don't have a great system for separate collection of food waste. And honestly, this is not unique to Delaware. I've been to all other states. I've been overseas. Nobody has a great system for collecting food waste from residents, especially because just like some people have mentioned, getting people educated into how to dispose of things properly is really difficult. And so we experience that with our recycling, but on a food waste, it can be even more overwhelming. One of the biggest problems that California has right now, and they probably are leading the way in the United States with food waste management facilities as far as anaerobic digestion, or even just straight aerobic composting facilities, is the sorting at people that when they try to collect from residents, you get heavy contamination. And so when you get that contamination, it makes it impossible to do anything with the product that you're trying to make. So yeah, you can collect you can collect gas for energy. That's certainly something they're doing, but they aren't doing anything with the product that they're making because that's just too heavily contaminated. So one of the things, back in 2016, I was co-chair on the organics task force that the state had put out. And one of the findings that task force is we felt like small scale facilities would work best. But my personal opinion is community, community gardening and community collection for material is even better than even, middle size, smaller AD program. Because, as much as everyone here is everyone that's on this call, everyone that's on this Zoom call is certainly in favor of this types of facilities, the majority of people just aren't. And they aren't not because they don't think food waste recovery is a good thing, but just because there's a lot of issues. There's odors that come from these facilities, even ones that are run completely by the book, the right way. There's going to be a certain amount of odors, and nobody, in Newcastle County, trying to cite even a mid-sized compost facility would be really difficult because nobody would want it anywhere near where they live. It's just a matter of fact. And it's just whether it's trucks coming in or odors from, or the noise from turning the windrows or whatever it is, those are all big issues. One of the projects that we were working on closely with University of Delaware, and it's kind of in its infancy stages, but we're getting ready to launch it because we've gotten some favorable reviews and reports back from UD. We work with their engineering department on what's called these in kitchen digest type of machines. The University of Delaware actually has two in their Caesar Rodney dining hall. And what these machines do is you put food waste that you can't recover. This is food you can't recover, because it's scraps or whatever. And it would go into this digest machine, which basically has enzymes, which decomposes the waste really fast. And then that waste actually goes into the wastewater treatment plant, where once it gets to the wastewater treatment plant in Wilmington, they have an anaerobic digestion system which collects the gas for energy. So it's not making compost and you don't have a finished product, but it is waste reduction. It's not recycling, but it's waste reduction. And our goal would be to get a lot of these systems in these heavy producing facilities, like places like school cafeterias, hospitals, anywhere where they produce a lot of food waste, large restaurants. I mean, we did the test that we did with Grotto Pizza on Main Street in Newark, and it went really well. But again, one of the biggest factors is human nature, and being able to train people to put the right things in the machines, and not put silverware, not put plastic straws. I mean, it sounds silly, but it's really difficult to get people to educate. Education is key in a lot of these issues. So these are just some of the things that we look at. I mean, obviously, we believe in food reduction before everything else, but ultimately when it comes to waste, that's where we kind of have to, where the rubber really hits the road for us. We have to manage it.
Excellent. Greg, is there something that you would like to add from a regulatory perspective?
I agree with Mike's sentiments. I mean, it's obviously, I was on a webinar yesterday that talked about New York City's food waste program and what Department of Sanitation does there. And they, you have to look at it from a multi-pronged approach, and they do, whether it's, curbside collection, which, as Mike mentioned, is extremely difficult and isn't going on currently in Delaware. We have enough problem with recycling, which we oversee. And from a backyard composting standpoint, which we certainly encourage, and we have compost bin sales that we do on a regular basis. We've got one coming up in the fall, just to try to get, again, that education and outreach there to go from that standpoint to, the community gardens or some type of drop-off system where that would work. And that's, the way they've tackled it, and that's kind of got to start somewhere. So I think kind of what you're doing with this community composting initiative is good. From the regulatory standpoint, we've got that little checklist more or less that we'd like everybody to fill out and go through. And that's, you're addressing those things, having the education there of, somebody on site that we can point to that's got, whether it be a master gardener or master composting kind of certification type thing that can oversee it and run it. And just want to make sure everything is there to make these successful, so it can run properly, and it's not just started and kind of goes by the wayside kind of thing. We want to kind of find a way to reduce the waste ending up in the landfills, so we can, yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. No, thank you very much for your feedback, both of you. And I know I don't want to have us run over too long, but I'm gonna ask my last question to Rabiul and Chad. Rabiul's from the Food Recovery Network at University of Delaware, and Chad is from the Food Bank of Delaware. How are your organizations working to prevent wasted food? Just to give kind of people an idea, how FRN works, how Food Bank of Delaware works, what you guys are doing. I think oftentimes people don't consider alternatives to potentially just, preventing food waste at home. What can retail businesses do? What can restaurants do? And so what are you guys doing? And hopefully maybe that will inspire some other people for some ideas. How about we start with Rabiul?
Yeah, so here at University of Delaware, we have 3 very large dining halls, including Caesar Rodney, which is really big. And they have a really difficult job of trying to estimate how much food to produce for a certain day based on how many students come in. And as you can imagine, that's incredibly difficult. And they're always going to be trying to have enough food. So they'll often overestimate the amount of food that they would need. So what happens is that at the end of the day, there's always a good amount of food that is perfectly edible, frozen, that's just left over. that they'll eventually have to throw away because they have a consistent schedule for what food to serve each day. So that's where our organization fits in. We essentially go into the dining halls. We have volunteers who do that. We take the frozen food and use the best food safety practices. We take that food, transport it to local soup kitchens. Currently, we work with the New York Empowerment Center, which is on Main Street. And they eventually store that food and then cook it up and serve it to individuals in need. So we have that going on, and we also have some other events, such as the end of the year food drive. And how that works is essentially we place these large bins at all of UD's residential halls. I think there's around 25 of them, so it's a lot. And we have volunteers checking in on, you know, are the foods perishable, or are you know, the baskets overflowing, whatever it may be. And at the end of the week, it's a week-long event. At the end of the week, we gather all of that and give it to another organization on campus called Blue Hen Bounty, which serves UD students and the UD community. But yeah, that's in a nutshell, that's what our organization does.
All right, I'll hop in. First, thanks everybody for participating. Certainly an honor to be with all of you and to hear the great work that's happening across the state as it relates to food security. Definitely just want to shout out Rabiul for his work at the Food Recovery Network. We need the next generation of young people to step up and make sure that that folks have access to food, and through the work that they're doing to ensure that food doesn't get wasted in the dining halls is incredibly important. And supporting Blue Hen Bounty, so many people don't think of the fact that there are college students that are food insecure. They just assume that because meals are offered in a dining hall or somewhere on campus that somehow everybody is able to eat, and that's not the case for so many students that are at our institutions of higher learning. So we appreciate the work that they're doing. So, but on the whole, we here at the Food Bank of Delaware are doing our best efforts to tackle hunger and food insecurity throughout the state. We're doing that through a variety of efforts in food distribution as it relates to making food product available for folks that need it. So we do that through a variety of programs, including mobile pantry programs where we're out in the community providing food directly to a community that needs it. We are ensuring that we can provide food for kids that are food insecure through our backpack program. These are kids that are at risk of going hungry on weekends that might not have access to food over the weekends, and providing meals for them over the course of those days that they're not in school. Through our senior meal program, where we're providing supplemental meal boxes for seniors for that time period when the pension check or Social Security check runs out, or whatever resources that they have and they need to fill in that time in the month where they just can't afford to buy food. And then so many folks are just struggling with the decisions of buying food or paying the rent, or buying food, or putting the kids in daycare, buying food, or getting medicines that they need. I mean, these are decisions that no person should have to face. And so we are very mindful of that. As it relates to kind of this call, we work with grocers, food retailers, and others to capture what maybe can't be sold in the store. So items that maybe in days past would have been called reclamated items. So maybe the box is torn, or the package is ripped, or the can is dented. Those are things that are certainly still good to eat and can be consumed by folks. So we're taking that, also working with them on perishable items, things like fruits and vegetables, as we talked about, that maybe can't be sold in the store, are coming to the end of their usable life for sale, but can still be consumed by by folks, and we're able to get those out to folks that need it. The same with farmers and growers. We encourage folks to consider planting a row for the hungry, and so thinking about that, and that's a great use of compost, right? Would be to think about using that compost material that you might have to plant that area and kind of bring it full circle. And so, but also working with farmers and others to say, if there are seconds or things that maybe can't go to market or are unable to be sold, are those things that they might be consider donating to the food bank, and us being able to get that out into the community. I did hear a conversation, I think it was Gail, and we've certainly had this conversation before about gleaning. That's certainly something that that's of interest here, at the food bank, but it's something that, as you might imagine, requires a great deal of effort, and it's certainly going to require the farm and ag community to come together with the food insecurity community, to come together with a pool of volunteers or regular folks that are going to do that, and it needs social acceptance. I think we've talked a little bit about that today too. These things have to become social and societal norms before they kind of get picked up on and run with, but there are certainly lots of great ideas out there. And then I'll just kind of close briefly because I know we want to be mindful of time, but also just ensuring folks are looking at what can be consumed. I know here at the food bank we use extended life guidelines for food, so folks can look up at USDA and FDA and find food is available. Generally packaged food product or things like that are safe to be consumed for longer than the print on date for which a person can buy food. Now that's not true with everything. Certainly if when your milk's gone bad, but there's also that to consider too. So folks shouldn't just think, oh my gosh, I've hit the date on this. Do I need to throw it away? They should check and see if it can still be utilized and not just for potentially consumption for themselves, but also for donation too. Some people think, oh, I can't donate that because it's past that date. And so definitely encourage folks to look at that. Every donation that we get here is checked against those guidelines. So if you're unsure and you don't want to look it up, just donate it because it's going to get checked when it gets here to the food bank to make sure that it's still good. But that's just something to consider as well. So thanks for the incredible work that everybody on this call is doing. Together, all of us as a community are going to address food hunger and food security in a meaningful way.
Thank you. And I have a quick follow-up question, Chad. And one for you, Rabiul. So real quick for Chad, I know a lot of people I've been talking to recently have been saying that they've been collecting like disposable utensils when they've gotten, to-go items. Would the food bank take those?
So on the whole, we are accepting a lot of those things. So if a person that has, food insecurity, they likely might be able not to afford some of those other, basic things too. So, plates and napkins and toilet paper and paper towels and just all of these things that we maybe take for granted at our home. So, yes, those are all things that we would look at here at the food bank, in addition to hygiene products and things like that, just to give another plug for other things. People are thinking about donating, being able to make those things available for folks too, because all of those things are needed by families that are food insecure. They may be struggling to afford some of those other things too. So we're definitely open to taking all kinds of donations.
Good to know. And Rabiul, real quick for you, did you guys, I know you weren't at UD when FRN, the chapter started, but have you ever had any issues with people pushing back with you moving food, questions about food safety? I know you briefly mentioned, you comply with all food safety regulation issues. For people who are unfamiliar, there's the Good Samaritan law, which basically says if you're, don't misquote me, but if you are transporting food, for the good of humanity, that it should be fine and to kind of legally save your butt, essentially. But have you had any issues with that, Rabiul? And Chad, if you have any insight as well.
Yeah, certainly. When the COVID strike hit, a lot of the organizations on campus just had to be completely closed down. So we started anew after that. And that was one of the primary problems that not only UD as a whole, but even volunteers would have some level of apprehension because they were essentially afraid of transporting the food. But we were able to convince them that, hey, we're using these insulated bags to transport them, so there's like no fear of the food going bad between transport, and we're checking the temperature before we pick it up and after we come to the local soup kitchen where we donated to, just to make sure that's still below freezing. And with all that, and also saying that we're legally protected by the Bill Emerson Act, I think we're able to convince everyone. But that is something that a lot of people here at UD and even the people that we donate to have sometimes some concern about. So definitely a worthwhile question.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely worthwhile question. I mean, that's some of the things that we're passionate about is maintaining food security, and so we have a director of food safety on staff here that is making sure that we're doing that, following the appropriate rules here and so forth. Brigid, you do give a good layman's version of Emerson, so that was good. And it's that's something that does provide support for folks. We've worked over the course of the last couple of years advocating to make sure that things like harvested deer and things of that nature are protected. And so we worked with the legislature on legislation about that, and then also have a desire to see if we could get to a place where we could replicate this protections of Emerson at the state level, just because there can always be a question in some's mind, in some folks' mind about federal versus state protections and what that looks like. So we have advocated for that as well. But food safety is certainly incredibly important, and when food is changing hands, and there are temperatures and things like that to be maintained, that's it, as Rabiul mentioned, something that's vitally important, and we want to make sure that the food we're giving out is safe. So that's something that we're very passionate about as well.
Thank you. And Bill Emerson, thank you. I know if I Good Samaritan, but I knew there was a more legit name. Well, thank you all. I'm going to open it up to our attendees to see if anybody has any questions. I have one final question that I can ask, but if other people have questions, I would love to hear those first. And Dee, if there's anything that's come in through the chat, please feel free to throw that out there now too.
The only question that I have been able to answer so far, Leslie asked Matt where, I don't know if he answered this, sorry if I missed it, where he's located and where we can find his products.
Okay, I will put it in the chat for everyone. But we are located at 22 East 23rd Street, Wilmington, 19802. And we are on, we have all the social mediums. We have our website that you can access us on, which is www.consciousconnectionsinc.com. Conscious is spelled CONSCIOUS, connections, plural, INC.com.
And just a little plug, I will be sending out everyone's contact information with the recording from today's event. So all the panelists, and that way you can find their and their websites and all of that. So in case you have a follow-up question or you want to support one of these organizations, you'll have all of that in that one email as well. But if you want to throw that in the chat, Matt, that would also be helpful. If there are no other questions, I have one just kind of like wrap up question, and it's really for any of our panelists. Feel free to jump in if you have a thought. We've talked a lot about food accessibility, food production in the state, food waste and issues, solutions. For me, a lot of the themes that have come out of this is education, meeting people where they're at, encouraging people to better understand what's going on, and just connecting people with their food. And I just saw a question come in from Anita. So I'm going to take a pause there and I'll ask that question. She said, there are community composting programs in media in Philadelphia. How can we in a neighborhood other join in or start one if we are just residents and we don't have a site or a manager? And so I would suggest, Anita, to reach out to me and see if we can find a partner site in your surrounding community, or see if we can drum up some support in your residential area. And I'm willing to, do some Q&A sessions and try to see how we can drum up support and see who we can make as a leader, even if you're not willing to be the leader. So I'm happy to work with you on that. For my panelists, is there anything that we haven't talked about today that you think people should be doing? Is there any legislation coming up that people should be out there supporting, other than going out and supporting these businesses that are already doing such great things, and providing funding as much as possible? Anything else that you guys think of that would be helpful?
Bridget, I just have one thing that I think we didn't really talk a lot about, and that's when we're talking about whether it's waste or even delivery of food, like transportation is a big deal. And so, one of the things when I was in Sweden and what they're doing there, and I don't know, it might be kind of late because most of our infrastructure is in place, but in cities like Helsingborg and Stockholm, they're building what they're calling smart cities. And the whole key to the city, it's not just about food, but even on the food side, is they're trying to find ways to limit as much transportation as possible, whether that's people or food or whatever. So they're growing in the cities, which we're doing that obviously with Matt, and what they're doing is fantastic. But the one thing I found really interesting was like IKEA, which is huge over there. Obviously we have them here too, but in Sweden, like a lot of people go to eat their meals there, and they're growing their produce in their parking lot in hydroponic chambers. And like the transportation is someone wheeling a cart from the cafeteria down to the parking lot. That's the transportation. So it's things like that and the other thing they're doing is, like, when they're building new homes, they put in a sewer line that basically goes from the kitchen sink to an AD facility where they're encouraging everyone to put their food waste right in their sink. It goes right to the anaerobic digester. It's producing gas, which is producing electricity for the city. And it's all, through pipes. So there's no cars, there's no trucks. It's things like this that, it's easier for them to do because there's a lot less people. I mean, it's like, population of Sweden is around 8 million. The population of New York City is around 8 million. So it's like, it's apples and oranges, but we have to think about these things sometimes because, greenhouse gas emissions from cars and trucks, and when we're picking stuff up and we're transporting it all over the place, especially waste, is really, we need to find new ways to think about that.
Anybody else want to comment?
I'd like to just plug for our own, the DCH, we're doing a lecture series on food waste, composting. There's a bunch of different topics. There's one tonight on community composting. They're all free, and there's a raffle for food compost tumblers is the word I'm looking for. Again, all free, and there's registration on our website. So there's a series, I think we're up to 7 of them. coming up, and Brigid is doing one. So you should all come see her too. And we hope to see some of you there.
Yes, and to promote that, tonight's is Brenda Platt from Institute for Local Self-Reliance, and she is an excellent speaker. So I'm hoping I can attend tonight. Well, okay, I'm going to wrap things up. I know this was a very long session, but I feel like a lot of great information was shared, and I've learned a lot of things and I have a lot of new ideas. So I'm very excited to continue to partner with all of you and work together in reducing food waste, but also increasing food accessibility and closing that loop really on our local food systems, which is really what this is all about. So a virtual round of applause to our awesome panelists. Thank you all for sharing your time and your wisdom with us. As I said before, I'll be sharing all of their website, social media, contact information with you when we send out the recording. And please, please, please consider supporting their organizations and businesses and checking out what opportunities and events that they might have coming up. Otherwise, thank you all for attending, and stay tuned for other events and things that Plastic Free Delaware and the Delaware Community Composting Initiative has coming up. Thank you.